So Jim's great. Jim's, you know, he's just like Lou. He's been in the community. He's been part of the community for a while, not as long as Lou, but Jim's somebody that you see at CXPA. I met Jim probably 5 or 6 years ago, and he was gracious enough to present. We did a joint CXPA and PDMA event. And so one of the things you'll hear a lot of today is a lot of this fusion, right? The talk right before this. So what Jim's going to be talking about, though, is, you know, why most CX programs fail. And, you know, he should know, too, right? He just wrote a book. Maybe talk a little bit about it. And so let's give a big round of applause to Jim Tincher of Heart of the Customer.
All right, thanks, Dave. Yeah, so one thing Dave didn't say about me is that I am a geek. I am a customer experience geek. And most of you know me, those people who know me probably know me as a different kind of geek, more specific than customer experience, which is that, yeah, I'm a journey mapping geek. That's how you know if you're at Target with me. Does anybody here have a teenage daughter? Okay. If you want to horrify your teenage daughter, okay, that works. But for those who know me well, I want you to be prepared to gasp. Are you ready to gasp? Okay. In this talk, I'm not going to talk about journey mapping. I know, amazing. It will come up because, you know, I can't not talk about it, but really it's more general than that, because I've been focus on customer experience now for about 10 or 12 years, since Eric hired me way back. And Eric, raise your hand. One of my best bosses, and fantastic. For some reason, he came here to see me, but so. We want to talk more about customer experience as a whole, though. Yeah, some journey mapping will slip out, but I really want to focus on customer experience. And again, I've been doing customer experience. In my eyes, I think Lou will disagree with me, but for me at least, customer experience really began as a discipline about 10 or 12 years ago when I was reading Bruce Temkin writing about it when he was with Forrester, about this customer experience thing. It's when I first started hearing the phrase. And it's getting more important. According to Gartner, back in 2012, 36% of companies said we're competing primarily on customer experience. Next year, that number is expected to be 81%. So really, we're seeing a lot more focus on customer experience, which is great. And 72% of businesses say that improving the customer experience is their top priority. How many people would agree that improving customer experience is your top priority of your organization? Wow, that's way less than 72%, or we have shy people, I don't know. But at least industry-wide, we're seeing a lot of focus. And that's the good news. The good news is companies are starting to recognize that customer experience matters. Okay, that's the good news. The bad news, we're not so good at it. This came out just recently. The XM Institute from Qualtrics, formerly Temkin Group, found that when they look at customer experience maturity, as you can see, about 3/4 are at the bottom. Half are at the very bottom. Despite working on this for years, we're still not very good at it. That's been corroborated with other data. If we look at CustomerThink, came out with a report in January, found that when they looked at programs, 17% were just starting. Basically 1 out of 6. Okay, let's set those aside. Of the remainder, 58% were developing. What does that mean? Well, essentially it means they're not winning. What does winning mean? I thought it was an interesting term that Bob used, winning. Winning is defined as being able to prove either a competitive or a financial difference because of your program. And that's what we're all striving for, right? To be able to have impact. But what Bob found in his report was that basically only 1 out of 4 programs are having impact. Pretty similar to what Bruce found. If we look at journey mapping, okay, we'll talk a little bit about it. From our work, we found something similar, which is that 2/3 of the time, organizations are not succeeding in journey mapping, and we see 3/4 of the time, they're not succeeding in customer experience. So we break up this room. We take this section of the room here, and can I borrow that microphone? All right. And so this section of the room, these are the CX rock stars. And I picked out the ultimate rock star here. If you could tell me your name?
Liz Tupper.
Liz Tupper? Liz Tupper, anyway. Liz, I'd like a round of applause for Liz as our CX rock star. Liz represents the 1/4 of all programs that are just doing the right work, having impact. Liz is really making it happen. That's this quarter of the room. Which brings me to this 3/4 of the room. And the CX losers, maybe? No, that's too hard. But I have picked out an ultimate CX loser to represent this group. And so, can you give me your name, sir? Eric Engwall. Okay, so we don't have this working. Anyway, Eric Engwall. So that's fine. That's all I need it for. So, so once again, we have, oops. Once again, your name? Liz Tupper and? Eric Engwall. So, what differentiates Liz from Eric? Let's talk about what is it that makes Liz such a rock star and Eric representing the programs that have failed to create impact. So, I am buying him dinner tonight to pay back for this. So, a couple things differentiate them. We're going to go more into detail on here. But first of all, Liz is focused on the business, on making a difference in the business. Eric is much more likely to be focused on his NPS score. But the NPS score is what we're looking at. We're trying to focus on that. And the first rule is, now, how many people have a leader, say a CEO in the organization, who says he or she cares about the Net Promoter Score? Does anybody have that? Okay, a few people there. That person may believe that. But you know who they spend most of their time talking to in the leadership group that they really care about? It'd probably be your CFO, right? And I got news for you. Your CFO does not care about your Net Promoter Score. Your CFO cares about business metrics. And unless you can tie what you're doing to what your CFO cares about, you're destined to be an Eric. That's the first thing. We're going to talk about that. Second of all, what differentiates it? So Eric loves PowerPoint. Eric loves Postit Notes. It's all about the PowerPoint and the Postit Notes there. Liz cares about the voice of the customer. Yeah, she uses PowerPoint too, but she's really bringing that voice of the customer to life, not relying on your charts or graphs. She's using videos. She's using personal visits. She is bringing the customer to life for the employees. And Eric is busy. I mean, he's really busy. Just, if you know Eric, he's a really busy guy. He spends a lot of time working his reports, spends a lot of time there. And so he's working his reports. He's talking to the folks at corporate. He's there. Liz? The people in the field know Liz. The customers have met with Liz. She's gone out with them. She's gotten out in the field. She recognizes that customer experience is a team sport, and she's got the whole team focused on the customer experience. That's what we find are the main differences. There's a lot more. You heard some great work earlier, hearing about from Best Buy about the differences when Jamie's talking about that. But let's go into what I found are the 3 rules for driving change. The 3 rules that if you focus on this as a CX leader, not only are you going to drive a lot more change, you're going to make your customers much happier. So we're going to focus on these 3 rules today. So that rule number 1, you ready for rule number 1? Okay. Attack a big problem. That's a scary thing to do. And by a big problem, I'm not talking about your Net Promoter Score. I'm talking about something that makes a substantial difference to the business. And it's not trying to tackle 10 problems. It's what is my big problem I'm going to focus on. And so, as I mentioned, I'm a customer experience geek, and I don't really care what bloggers or speakers have to say about good CX practices. Even if those bloggers are authors, really good-looking people, very smart people that are speaking in front of the stage right now, I don't care what those people say. I care about what real people are doing inside the organization. So I've asked some friends, I've brought them along. A number of these people are here. Many of them are represented on our blog at Heart of the Customer. And I've asked some of them to share some of their stories. And so first of all, we look at what differentiates winning programs. This is from that CustomerThink white paper I mentioned earlier. They found a whole bunch of differences between the Liz's and the Eric's. But first one is, much more likely, the winning programs, to take an outside-in perspective. Now, what's interesting is that was an answer to a survey question. So the Erics of the world self-identified that we don't take an outside-in perspective. We heard earlier Lisa talking about how they've really made that shift. Number one. Number two, okay, you knew it had to be here. I didn't choose this, the research said it, develop customer journey maps, but what he actually found was it wasn't just doing journey mapping. What's way more important is how you do your journey mapping. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this coming up here. We heard from Dr. Beeman earlier about the importance of getting out there, of being with your customers for a long time, not doing a focus group, but actually really getting deep in there. And that's one example of what journey mapping done well, is it's really getting out there and immersing yourselves in the customer. The third item is they have a commonly understood brand vision. So Eric's focused on his Net Promoter Score, focused on that. Liz is really much more focused on, we need to be tying into what the brand is doing. Customer experience should be a reflection of the brand, not its own thing. And so much more likely to have brought in that brand vision and using that to drive our program. And then lastly, the one I really want to focus on is create a business case to connect the business outcomes. Anybody here a Harvard Business Review reader? A number of you there. I don't know if you read, I think it was last month's article, they talked about our metrics killing your business. In fact, I saw the cover here earlier. And what they found is that for the Erics in the world, the score has become the strategy. If the score is your strategy, that's when you're setting up problems. Has anybody used Abra? Okay, Abra Auto Body? I used them, not the last time before that I came in there, I used them. In my packet, my welcome packet, they had a filled out survey, just so I knew how to fill it out right. 10 for likelihood to recommend. Did you have a problem? No. Would you come back to this Abra location? Yes. They were very helpful in telling me what to do. Why did they do that? The score has become the strategy, and they want higher metrics. What does that do to your NPS program? It's worthless, exactly. That's what we find is that for the poor programs, the score has become the strategy. The best programs still use scores. I mean, scores are still going to be there, but it's not about the scores, it's about the business. And so, a couple of examples. First of all, Elda's not here today. Her team is. They're in a different session. I'm going to have to talk to them about that. But one of the things I love working with Elda over at Meridian Life, and we've done 3 projects with them, is that she will not take on a project if you don't give her a KPI that she can move. And Net Promoter Score, no matter what some people say, is not a KPI. Can we improve speed of time to value for customers? Percentage of customers taking us up. What can we improve in the business, or else I'm not doing it? She's really clear on this. If you don't know Elda, I'd suggest setting up some time with her because she has a clear vision that if there's not something about the business we can impact, then let's not do it. Similarly, I don't know, anybody know Mark Smith? He's been active in the Customer Experience Professionals Association, the CXPA. I interviewed him for our book. And one of the things he talked about was a killer metric. So, well, what's a killer metric? Never heard of this. So there's one metric you use to drive your program. One. So for Delta, it's canceled flights. How many people have had a flight canceled on them? Okay. Can they do anything to make it better? No, it's a bad thing. So that's their killer metric. Mark said, well, he had at that time was the VP of Customer Experience for Element Fleet. And so they do fleets for companies. Okay, that doesn't apply to me. Nobody cancels your car. That doesn't work for me. Amazon's killer metric is number of contacts per order. In Amazon's view, any contact is a bad thing. Now, what's interesting is they own Zappos, which doesn't feel that way. But in Amazon's view, if you have to contact us, something went wrong. And that's their killer metric. That's what they use to drive the business. He said, well, that isn't quite right either, because if you're riding a car, if Lou, you've got one of our fleet cars and your car breaks down, do I want to prevent Lou from calling? That would be bad, right? But he said, we have a lot of calls that come in because they don't understand what they're supposed to do. They don't understand our materials, they don't understand our app. We have created a need for them to call. That's his killer metric, avoidable calls. So if Lou's car breaks down, that doesn't count, that's good. But if Lou calls in because I don't know how he's supposed to get fuel, or I don't know where I go for something, then that's our fault, so that's his killer metric. Do you have a killer metric you can use? Something to drive your business? Because if you do, that's what I would focus on. Now, sure, look to see if Net Promoter Score predicts it. A Capital One 360, anybody here a Capital One 360 customer? A few years ago, they were interested, their killer metric was referrals. And what they found is they measure two things: likelihood to recommend and simplicity. How simple was the site, or how simple was your interaction? In a rational world, which one better predicts referrals? Likelihood to recommend or simplicity? In a rational world. Yeah, in a rational world, likelihood to recommend, right? What they found is that simplicity was a better predictor of recommendations than likelihood to recommend. But if they hadn't had the killer metric, they wouldn't know that. So what is your killer metric? What can you use to really drive the business? And so a number of really good metrics out there, ones I really like. For example, who all is in a B2B organization? Okay. I find share of wallet, really good metric. Hard to measure, but if you can measure it, that's a really good metric. Now, it often has to be done by surveys instead of actual business data, but it's still a really good metric. And does your CFO care about that? Oh, yeah, your CFO really cares about that. Customer churn, Jeannie Bliss talks about number of new customers in, number of customers out. Now, again, that can be easy or hard to measure depending on your business. Related to that would be renewal rates is a common one, especially in B2B, but B2C as well. What are these key business metrics that your business is driving that you can drive as well? So I'd like you to do, actually, let's go with one more story first. And so, Allianz Life. Renee presented with me at the AMA a couple of months ago when we launched our book. And we've done 3 projects now with Allianz Life. And similarly, they're really focused on, if we're going to do something, we need to know what we're trying to drive. Angelica won an award, an innovation award, because she recognized that we have a lot of unnecessary calls coming to our contact center for people who don't understand our annuity. Anybody here have an annuity? Okay. Well, so a couple people. Many people fund their annuity from the 401k. What do you get every month from your or every quarter from your 401k? Get a statement, right? So what do people expect from their annuity every quarter? Does an annuity change every quarter? Okay. It's an annuity, right? It's annual, but they had all this confusion because people were used to that. And so they recognized that this is something we want to drive. We have these, first of all, calls to the call center that are unnecessary, and second of all, a lot of confusion of our customers. And so when they kicked off their second project with us, the kickoff was led by the CEO. The CEO himself came in to kick it off because it was that important to the organization. And that's something that they do really well, is focus on how do we drive the business. So what I want you to do now is I want you to grab a partner. I want you to spend 1 minute talking about what is that one metric that your CX program can drive. You have 1 minute. Go. All right, Dave's going to bring around the microphone to ask a couple folks to share an example. So who'd like to share an example? All right, here we go back here. Fantastic.
My name's Pete Steggy from Deluxe, and one idea for us would be cross-sell or additional purchases of other products. We have a lot of things to offer, and most of our customers are just buying one thing.
And so let's talk about that a little bit more. So that's a great example, cross-sell. Now, is that a good or bad outcome of CX? Should be good, right? Let's set Wells Fargo aside for a minute. Outside of that situation where they had some culture issues, that's a great metric, because if you are creating a great experience, you should find your customers want to use you more. It's related to share of wallet, easier to measure, that is share of wallet, so that's a great example. Do you have one other to share? Okay, Alyssa up here will share. Thank you.
So I work for Schwann's and we do food products. So I work for Schwann's, Alyssa Schultz. We do food products, and our key killer metric would definitely be quality. Because if we don't have good quality products, then people aren't going to want to purchase them, right?
So a great example there. We do find, in a rational world, again, customer experience and quality would be separate, but in a real world, that's not. There's a lot of overlap between those two, and so that's a great example. So that's rule number one. Rule number one is? Tackle a big problem. All right, exactly. Rule number two, Post-it notes don't drive change. I don't know, if anybody here's from 3M, please avert your eyes here. We find the Erics of the world think you take all the people who are messing up the customer experience, put them in a room, give them Post-it notes, bam, everything's better. Liz knows that Post-it notes don't drive change. The voice of the customer drives change. And so she's really focused on how do we bring that voice of the customer to the organization? How do we make the customer real? There's a dirty little secret, maybe not so much, about B2B organizations. Change requires a different approach. In a typical B2B organization, 90% of your employees have never met a customer in person. Yet they're all making decisions that are impacting your customer experience. Lisa talked about that earlier as well. And so how do you break that barrier down? How do you bring the customer to life for your employees? Now, you can't bring every employee out to visit customers. We'd love to do that. It's less of a problem, for example, with Best Buy, because I remember when I worked at Best Buy, if I didn't visit a store once a year, I'm in trouble. It's very much a part. I worked for one organization. I came in, I said, I'd like to talk to customers. They said, why? We don't have budget for that. It's a plane flight. I know, but there's no budget. Why do you want to talk to customers? If I need to explain to you why I need to talk to customers, this is not going to be a productive conversation. But in B2B organizations, it's a challenge because most people don't meet customers face to face. And I can tell you this, that seeing your customer's world firsthand will drive more change than any report. In fact, we just did a project with a software company, and the head of implementation was talking to me afterwards. He said, I didn't want to go on these customer visits. I'm at customers all the time, but I'm at customer sites when something is broken and they've escalated to me. The opportunity to talk to a customer when nothing's broken, and we just want to hear how it's going, really opened my eyes. And so that's what Liz does, is he says, how do we get that voice of the customer to life for all of our employees? How do we do that? Marlange is from Prime Therapeutics. I interviewed her from my blog. She talked about how they create videos. They bring the customer to life through videos they can put on the internet, short 30-second to 1-minute videos, so they can hear what customers are saying. Something I'm seeing in the industry is a lot more focus on video. We've been doing that from the start 6 years ago, but I've seen much more video being done. In fact, Lou, your son, is with a company that they embed video interviews as part of your survey. And so it's starting to see us a lot more. It's a lot of work to do with video, but the payoff is incredible. Jason Capel, he created a customer room. And he took that customer room to his different locations, to call centers, to headquarters, different locations, so they could understand what the customer is saying. And Jason told me once, he said, Jim, I think you think about my customer room more than I do. But because it's so rare, I rarely run across organizations that have a customer room. This is a room specifically set up so you can hear the customer in a service call. You can understand your personas. You can bring the customer to life for your employees. It's unfortunately very rare. Now, there was a case study about 8-10 years ago with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan who spent $100,000 in their customer experience room, and that's cool. Jason spent $2,000, maybe a little bit more approachable. But bringing that life to the employees is something that they've really done quite well. And the final example here in this section I want to talk about is Darren. Remember Lisa just spoke? Darren's her boss. But for our book, none of our B2B companies let us use their names. I don't know what it is. So in the book, he's ABC Software instead of Walters Clore. And we shared a couple of projects we did with them. And a couple of years ago, they were building a software product, and they were talking about it a little bit earlier, to help banks originate commercial loans. And Darren knew that if we aren't careful, we're just going to take our own perceptions and we're going to embed them in the software, and it might miss the mark. And so we worked with them to bring their programmers and their product managers out firsthand to hear from their customers. We took them to a bank. We spent a half a day following a loan from beginning to end so they could understand firsthand what's happening and what is really needed. Now, also as part of that, because we couldn't bring everybody out, we collected videos of the whole thing. And Darren talks about one of the videos. And so, let's say, Alyssa, you work for the bank. All right, Dave's getting a loan from you. Dave's putting all of his money, he's putting all of his financial data inside of this packet for you so you can approve the loan. So he gives that to you. Now, Alyssa has to take that loan and give it to Eric, who gives somebody else, to take all the paperwork, and she's responsible for this paperwork. Her job is that she's going to give that paperwork back to Dave. She gives it to Eric, who passes it along, who passes it along, who passes it along, and passes it along. Alyssa's job is to make sure that paperwork gets back. How does she feel about handing it to all these different people who then hand it to each other? She's concerned, she's anxious, and we have this wonderful video of a woman at a bank talking about how much anxiety she has to try to find out because, again, we've already established Eric's a loser. He loses things. But all that paperwork gets lost, and it's her job to go track it down. And so that really informed their whole development approach. That one video really helped them understand. Now, they always knew it would be good to digitize, but now they understood implicitly it's not just good, it's critical because that allows Alyssa to be more relaxed. And so these videos, using this to really bring the customer to life for their employees, drives more change than any NPS report. So the first rule was, is that a big problem? Okay, right, coffee coming soon. Second big problem is, what doesn't drive change? What does drive change? Voice of the customer. That's the second rule. Our third rule is that customer experience is a team sport. So involve your whole team. That your whole organization, as they talked earlier, is involved with change the customer experience. So they all need to know what's happening. And it comes back to change management 101. Okay. Teams won't be part of the solution if they aren't part of the process. Unless you give ownership to everybody in the organization, you won't really have a customer experience transformation. It needs to be real for everybody. I love the example earlier about finance. Finance is a very important role. I think Jamie spoke to that, right? About finance is a very important role in the customer experience, but they don't feel like it. How do you understand that everybody plays a role in that customer experience? How do you get everybody involved? And so Andrea's here today. She's heard me speak enough times. I guess she's a different session. But one of the things I loved about Andrea's approach is after we did our first project with her, she recognized she needed to get a better idea of the customer experience. And so what she did is half-time for 3 months, she worked in a location. And she took the jobs nobody else wanted. So she was there cleaning the treadmills. Why would your CX leader be cleaning treadmills? Do you pay any attention to the person cleaning treadmills near you? Probably not. And she was able to hear a lot of great conversations about what people were saying about the why by being there cleaning the treadmills. She went out there and spent that time. And so as a result, when she came up with ideas, She had trust because the team knew she was out there in the field, talking with the field firsthand, hearing from them, but also hearing from customers. I don't have a picture of her, but Alyssa, one of the things, so 8 years ago, I applied for a job and I lost to Alyssa. I think I actually won by not getting that job, I don't know. But one thing she did, she was a CX leader for about 6 months, a year, and then she went and took a job as a field operator. She went out there and actually managed a territory so she could hear it firsthand. These are approaches I don't hear many people doing, but it's a way it really informed how she ran the program. And then Lori Englert, she's with LeGrand, used to be Milestone AV. She put together a CX program and very deliberately brought in people from the field, different parts of the organization, because she knew if she wants to drive change, the whole organization needs to be involved. And she created a broad, federated model so we could have everybody involved at designing and driving the customer experience. Whereas the Erics of the world have a small team, they sit at the corporate office, they do their PowerPoints. The Liz's of the world have a broad approach. They bring in a lot of people. Even if they don't have the official title, she creates champions, gets them involved so they can all work together to drive that experience. And one last example is one not from the Twin Cities, but was mentioned in 2 books. First of all, Mapping Experiences, and second of all, in our book, $39.95 available at the back table. So, I think it's $40, whatever. But Tria, when I first met her, was the Senior Director of Patient Experience Marketing at Meridian Health. Her boss was Chrissy, the VP of Marketing. And when we met them, they were preparing to be merged with Hackensack to become Hackensack Meridian Health. Now, if there's a merger and you get the second name, what does that mean? It's not a merger, right? Chrissy had been slotted to have her position eliminated, and Tria, they weren't sure. But they said, we have the funding, we have the blessing, let's go forward. Their business problem, and this is a phrase that my team hates to hear, but it's apparently pretty common. Anybody here in healthcare? Okay. Patient leakage. I hate that term. It's very visual, that patient leakage. But what that means is, in their situation, they were studying advanced radiology, and it was the number of patients who would use them for other services, but not in radiology, such as an ultrasound, CT scan, MRIs. And their business problem was, how do we get more of our patients to use us for this service? We know there's a lot of leakage going on. How do we fix that? And so when we worked with them, we identified 3 personas. I want to share 2 of them with you today because it really reflects some of the work she did. Seen It All Stanley and High Maintenance Holly. Now, demographically, they're pretty much the same. They're both boomers with a lot of health issues. The one big difference was trust for Meridian. And so this is Stanley's journey. Looks pretty good, right? A lot of green. Okay. Any health insurance organizations here? Okay. Well, the low spot is them trying to get insurance coverage. That's the only downside. But overall, very happy with the experience. Stanley loves the hospital. He has a favorite place to park at the hospital. Okay. I never want a favorite place to park at any hospital. But what does that say about him? Yeah, he's there a lot. He trusts the hospital. And so as a result, he gives them the benefit of the doubt. I talked to one Stanley at the end of a long day of interviews. And he had a CT scan looking for cancer. And I said, how would you rate this journey on a scale of 1 to 5? I said, well, I'd give it a 4. Okay. Well, how could it be a 5? Well, they missed my tumor. Wait, excuse me, what was that? Yeah, they didn't see my tumor. I brought it into my doctor. He saw it plain as day, but they missed my tumor. I said, wait, let me see if I have this right. You have a CT scan because you might have cancer. You went in, they missed it, and you gave them a 4? So yeah, no big deal. They'll catch it next year. Whoa. Stanley trusts the hospital. And so even when they mess up, he knows they'll make it right. Okay? That's High Maintenance Holly. Does she trust the hospital? Holly needs to be in charge. So even when she's getting insurance, she still has the positive because she's in control. When does she lose control? The minute she steps foot in the hospital grounds, she loses control, and that's when everything goes south. And what Meridian's problem was is they designed their experience for Stanley, the trusting person. Over a quarter of the Hollies we talked to got lost in the hospital. Not because there wasn't signs, but because she was so anxious that she missed the signs. They were designing the experience for Stanley. Holly was having a terrible experience and wouldn't come back. Now, TRIA's in marketing. At least in their organization, marketing is the least powerful part of the organization. She knew she could not drive change on her own. And so she followed these 3 rules. First of all, she went after a big problem. Advanced radiology is very profitable for a hospital. We have a metric, the leakage metric. We're going to go after that. Second of all, she brought the customer to life. She had everybody come in to hear firsthand from the customers, the patients. We did behind-the-wall interviews. She used these videos to get them out to the organization and to drive change. But lastly, the most important part, in fact, this is one of the most important factors in customer experience as a whole, is she used a broad team. She knew she couldn't drive the change. She had the doctors as part of the process so that the doctors could drive change. In most hospitals, doctors are the source of power. And she knew that if I want to drive change, I need to make them as part of that. And so as a result, not only were they able to really improve their patient leakage, which is still a word I hate to say, but they improved the patient leakage, but also after the merger, Chrissy, her boss, was promoted to the CMO of the combined organization, and she's now the vice president of culture because she's been able to drive change in the organization through attacking big problems. Secondly, focusing on the customers, in this case patients, not Postit Notes. But lastly, she understands that customer experience is a team sport, and she needs to use the whole team to drive change. And so I'm going to open it up we have time for 2 questions? All right, so 2 questions before we go over there.
First, thank you very much for your presentation. Obviously, I agree with everything you've said. But let me ask you a question. You run your own business, and all of the measures that you're talking about are very familiar to me, and I will tell you that the principal obstacle running a business that advocates these sorts of things is convincing people to adopt these measures, because they will tell you, oh my God, they're so expensive. I can just send out a survey monkey and get the same results. And it is because it is expensive. It takes a long time. It's very intensive. And convincing people that the results are worth the expenditure is, I think, a very serious business problem, and perhaps you can address that. Sure.
I don't think you'll like my answer. First of all, so that is what our organization does. We do coaching, we do journey mapping as well. One of the benefits we have is that we haven't had to sell. I'm not a salesperson. I am our salesperson. We haven't sold. We've been able to find advocates who have this belief and use this model to help them think a little bit differently, to look for the business problems, for example. That's one of the biggest challenges we have. And what we find, oh, by the way, a lot of times both friends and clients will have leadership say, don't worry about that business linkage, just go out and do these other things, which works great until what happens when there's a change in leadership. Yeah. Every time, they're either out the door or at least they lose their power. So what we do is we help them understand that, yes, you will have more impact by taking the time to tie it into a metric. It's not easy. In fact, it feels like a distraction because it's not doing the other things, but starting with that. And so we're starting with people who are true believers, and that's made it a lot easier. Our worst project ever, a journey mapping example, was be a bank who I should have known it was going to be bad in the first call. She called, spent 90 minutes peppering me with questions on methodology. She was in market research. And at the end, I said, okay, now what journey do you want to map? Boy, I don't know. What journey do you think we should map? In that case, she wasn't focused on the business at all. She was focused on the map, the artifacts. And so that ended up being a terrible project. That was one of our early projects. We wouldn't do that anymore. But we find that if we take the time to make people think about the KPIs, some of that self-selection happens. And so we're working with people who actually have the belief to start with. So it's not a satisfying answer. We're not taking non-believers and making believers. We're just taking believers and helping them become more effective. Okay, that's the time. So one last time, let's repeat those 3 rules for driving change. Number 1, tackle a big problem. If your CEO doesn't care, or more importantly, if your CFO doesn't care, you shouldn't either. Number 2, focus on the customers, not the Postit Notes. The voice of the customer is what brings it to life. Videos are the way to go. Bring them to life. Get your employees out to meet customers. Bring your customers in. And lastly, customer experience is a team sport, so involve your whole team. If you do this, not only are you going to make a lot more change internally, your customer is going to thank you because you're going to have real impact. Thank you all.